When someone leaves his religion, he is surely to face various questions from various people. And it is worse when it comes to leaving Islam. Unfortunately, when a Muslim leaves his religion or even questions his religion, he is subjected to all sorts of verbal abuses. Should this be the way? Should this be the way to bring back a Muslim from apostasy? Or shouldn't the Muslim community be more helpful to a Muslim who has many questions? When a Muslim is questioned about his religion, he is obviously should be expected to be answering those questions if someone is interested in his religion. But it has been impossible for a Muslim to question his various aspects of beliefs if he is being brought up in a Muslim country. Why? Because that's the tradition. The tradition has been always not to question the Islamic faith in any aspect of life. But over the centuries, Islamic jurisprudence have grown. It has borrowed from various customs and various other laws of many other lands. So Islamic jurisprudence has, to some extent, drifted away from Sharia a lot. Now, to understand the Sharia, Islamic scholars over the centuries have interpreted Islam depending on the society they were in and depending on the era they were born into. Now, we are living in an era where internet makes it accessible for ordinary people to find out various things on various platforms: social media, Google, WhatsApp, Instagram, YouTube. They all provide sources of information. So we cannot keep a growing young man away from questioning. So Islamic scholars need to reassess their understanding of not questioning the faith. This is not being helpful. Rather, if you do not let someone ask, then you have something to hide or you have a weakness. And with this question in mind, many Muslims are leaving Islam. And you can say millions are coming to Islam. It's true. But millions are coming, especially in countries where Muslims or anyone is allowed to ask question. Islamic scholars of the West are much more liberal than the Islamic scholars of Muslim lands because they have taken it for granted. They have taken Islam for granted. So Islamic jurisprudence have conscripted or they have become absolute, tough. After European imperialization for 200 years, Islamic jurisprudence have stalled. And Islamic madrasa education has drifted away from secular educations like science, philosophy, chemistry, etc. And it seems that Islamic jurisprudence or study of Islam is somehow at daggers drawn with the modern educational system. Should this be the way? Of course not. As I have now reverted to Islam, I have started reassessing Islam from a different angle, from the angle I used to believe in. When I questioned the silence of Islamic scholars at the atrocities which were being carried out in Europe, I was bombarded with abuses. If you remember my viral video in response to the Islamist attack in Paris, I received many threats from hardline Islamists. But ordinary Muslims were not so vocal in my defense. Now, in response to that, I have made very many videos where I criticized Islam, Islamic jurisprudence, Islamic way of life, Muhammad and his ways. After leaving Islam, or even when I started questioning the ways of the Islamic scholars, as I said, I started receiving abuses. I became angry. I became angry to the fact that I couldn't find many Muslims in my defense. And the vast majority of Muslims who probably thought that I had my right to condemn the terrorist attack were not so vocal. Their silence made me angry. And I started viewing Islam from the very point of view Islamists or even hardline ultra critics, ultra nationalist critics and fascists who view Islam as a death cult. I started viewing Islam from the same angle. And as I thought that flexible interpretation of Islam was rather apologetic and full of lies. Why? Because when you go for dogmatic Islam, when you go for orthodox Islam, you will see it is not flexible. And it is rather attractive to young fools. And it is easy to preach, whether you like it or not, and it is also easy to be criticized. It is the Islam of the fools. Even if you do not love any religion, or if you think all the religions are man made, still you have to accept that there are billions of people who are following various religions. So rather, you should allow apologists to preach however they can to make their religion more humane in the 21st century, more acceptable in the 21st century, as long as we can all unite in our understanding of modern standards of humanity. Just poking a religion in aspects which the observance of those religions do not follow anymore, there can be no purpose whatsoever. What is the purpose on poking a Muslim, entire Muslim community about child marriage when most of them don't believe it in anymore for whatever strong or lame or weak or moderate arguments they might have? So what's the purpose in poking them? What's the purpose in poking a Hindu community who do not believe in drinking cow piss anymore, although there are some Hindu extremists or fundamentalists who drink cow piss, and I still want to justify it to be scientific or divine somehow. So there can be no reason whatsoever in poking the entire community for that. So I have rather accepted the broader and more humane interpretation of my religion, Islam, and it makes sense now. It all makes sense. And after accepting this apologetic, if you want to call it, or humane interpretation of Islam, I have found Islam to be divine. And I found Islam not to be at daggers drawn with the standards of humanity of today. This is the Islam which everybody should be able to work with. And we all need to work to make this a success. Why? Because you can't expect billions of Muslims to just simply drop their religions and become atheists tomorrow. It has rather made Muslims being hated by other communities. I was shocked to see when Islamists attacked ordinary people in Paris, and I was also shocked to see Muslims getting killed in Christchurch, and many Islamic haters of Islam, haters of Muslims, were starting to rejoice. They all rejoiced at the death of Muslims, and that shocked me. And that made me wake up. What the hell am I doing? Who am I calling my friends? How can we not just simply accept that people may have differences of opinion, and it is not right to condemn a religion which is being followed by a good number of people in the world in a wholesale manner? It doesn't serve any purpose other than creating more hatred to call a religion death cult, to call a religion totally absurd or to call a religion disgusting, because that will help those who do not like Muslims to have more excuses to hate them more. That will create schisms amongst the communities. That cannot be the way. That shouldn't be the way. Rather, you should criticize religions from aspects which influence today and leave the rest, if you don't like, as absurd or not necessary or irrelevant. So, those of you who poke religions in aspects which are simply not relevant today, or which the observance of those religions do not follow anymore, then I see that you are being hateful if you keep on poking. Now, why have I come back to Islam? I take it as a blessing from Allah. It is simply a blessing from Allah, nothing else. I still condemn killing of ex-Muslims, and I still think laws should be enacted and interpretations should be made in fresher ways of Quran and Hadiths. And those Hadiths, barbaric Hadiths, which are not acceptable today, should be chucked out. And Islamic scholars should be finding a way to make Hadiths more humane by bearing in mind that only Quran is the divine revelation. And regardless of the fact that Hadith collectors all tried to make the Hadiths as perfect as they could, still there were possibilities, and there are possibilities, that those Hadiths are not flawless. So let's work on that. Let's work on the fact that Quran is the only divine revelation, and Hadiths which are not humane need to be questioned. And we need to find out whether Quran agrees with those Hadiths. I still condemn the behavior of Islamist extremists, how they take away the rights of modern humans to live a life of harmony with other believers. Islam was being interpreted throughout the centuries by various Islamic scholars through ijma, qiyas, and etc. But it seems there are enemies of Islam who want Islam to die from within, and they want to empower Salafist Wahhabist Islam, the Islam of the young fools, to make Islam collapse from within. And it is about time that we should challenge that. It was a mistake for the West to give birth to an ultra Wahhabist nation like Saudi Arabia, because this is the Islam which is being spread throughout the world with the funding from the ally of the West, Saudi Arabia. An Islam which was not the Islam of the vast majority of Muslims throughout the centuries. Islamic scholars over the centuries worked a lot to make Islam more humane as the time progressed. But this Islam pushes people backwards. Now, when I left Islam, I couldn't find many Muslims to come and give me a helping hand to understand this. That's why I call it a blessing from Allah and Allah only. I only found Muslims shunning me, my own family members shunning me, not being able to see my own children, not finding a safe and secure life anymore. So that made me angrier. So if you really want Muslims not to leave Islam in droves, when you find them questioning the faith, love them more. Give them patient hearing. Because I believe Islam has the answer to all the questions they might have. And we can save them from apostasy that way. Thank you for listening.